Husbands and wives that got divorced after 20 years of marriage. What made you decide to change your mind after all that time? He tried to kill me, which I feel is impolite. There's a guy in my town that everyone knows about because he owns this huge ass mansion in a middle class neighborhood. Apparently he was married to a woman for a long time, but she left him, calling him a loser because his business hadn't taken off yet. After she left him, his business finally took off. He sells medical equipment to hospitals, and he became duck-you levels of rich in a few years. The reason he built the mansion in that neighborhood was because that is where she lives, so she has to drive by the mansion on her way to work every day. My parents got divorced after 22 years of marriage. They were never in love, and didn't even like each other. They had me, and then my sister a few years later, and wanted to stay together for the kids. 12 years after I was born they had my brother, and that kept the cycle going. I wish I could say they are happy now, but they still like to cause trouble for each other. We are due with our first child soon, and they are gonna have to figure out how to be grandparents together. Thankfully I'm 1,500 miles from them, so it won't be a headache often. My parents split up after nearly 30 years. My dad was an asshole my entire life. So when they finally divorced, when I was 18, there was no surprise. He'd been cheating for years, and I think he was the one who finally asked for it. I think my mom stayed because she couldn't afford to start over. She spent her life putting my dad through school and wasn't educated herself. She had no family or anyone who could help her either. There was definitely some confidence issues on her part too. Therapy changed my mind. After more than a decade of being miserable, I finally got help. When I was able to really talk about my marriage was when I realized that I needed to get the duck out. At the end of the day, I stayed in a crappy marriage because the thought of being alone scared me. Through therapy I was clued into how many wonderfully supportive friends and family members I had. If I just reached out to them, I wasn't going to be in a relationship anymore, but I wasn't alone neither. We were together for 20 years, married for 15. We started as high school sweethearts, but we eventually realized that we weren't the same people we were when we fell in love. We also realized that that wasn't going to change. We decided that the best way for everyone to be happy for the rest of our lives was to end it on peaceful terms, before we were both 70 and resentful of each other for trapping each other in an unhappy marriage for 40 years. Didn't get divorced, but started the process after about 25 years. Stuck it out for a few more years for the kids, and ended up falling in love with her after the kids moved out. Relationships follow cycles. So glad I stuck it out. Not me, but my grandmother once told me that she was considering divorcing her husband of over 50 years. The reason she gave me was, we stayed together for the kids. Now the kids are all grown up and have lives of their own. And now I can't ignore the small things about him. My grandpa. That annoy me. She didn't go through with it, but she seemed sincere when she said it. It broke my heart. Especially since I only ever saw the best side of him. Edit. Thank you for the silver. Kind stranger. She cheated for years. Plain and simple. Ended our 22-year marriage. TBH. Don't even want to work through it. Now that we've separated for a while, I realize how toxic she'd become. I'm a much better man without her. My dad had multiple affairs and my mom got tired of it. There was also alcoholism and both parents were workaholics. My dad remarried a lovely woman. And so did my mom. Oh. That may have been an issue too. Edit. Gold. Thank you, kind stranger. My grandparents initiated divorce proceedings a month after my dad, the youngest of his siblings, graduated college. They had stayed together to provide a stable home for their children. And once they'd all left the nest, my grandparents were ready to move on. My parents started considering divorce right around that time, but ended up deciding against it. My dad was military and had PTSD from Afghanistan. But it didn't cause problems at home, because he was stationed at a base across the state from us. So he was only home on the weekends. When he got restationed and we moved, We all lived in the same house again. His PTSD and my mom's anxiety did not play off of each other well. So they considered divorce, but decided to work through it. He killed the dog. She was getting older, and if left alone for more than 7 hours, she would pee in the basement on the cement. I would check daily and mop if needed. But we were in the process of burying a new house, and he decided she wasn't coming with us. Rather than discussing with me, he took the easy route and made her disappear while I was at work. Having to console my young sons that evening, and seeing their trauma was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. My heart closed to him instantly. Tired of him cheating on me. The last time was the last time. My parents were together for 24 years. My dad left my mom after his best friend, who was 6 years younger than him, died. My dad went into a depression about his own life and left my mom for some witch at his work because he felt he was missing out on life by being with my mom. Some couples just grow apart. After 20 years you are two entirely different people. It's hard work to stay together. I don't have direct knowledge of this, but I'm guessing the general theme you're going to find is some variation of stayed together for the kids.